Welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. It's your host, John Abbas here. And today I have a very exciting episode with a guest that is literally changing the world one movie set at a time. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you and just ask that you take 2 seconds, hit that subscribe button so that you get a quick notification every time I release a new episode. If you are returning, I just want to welcome you back and say thank you so much for listening and for your support, whether this is your second episode or your 50th episode. I just want to say I appreciate you. Now, today I get the absolute pleasure of interviewing Emellie O'Brien. Emellie is the founder of Earth Angel, which is the top sustainable production services company in the world for film and TV productions. They have made over 70 sets sustainable. Yeah, 70 to date, including movies that you've heard of, movies like Spider-Man, Black Panther, the TV show Billions, the Avengers, and many, many more. And there's actually this really awesome video that I will put in the show notes. I highly recommend you watching it. And it's just a video on how Emellie and her company made Spider-Man 2 the most eco-friendly blockbuster in the world. And just all the things that went into that. It's just mind-blowing. In today's episode, we talk about Emellie's story, her company, and then we talk about one of my favorite things, which is Hollywood, and not the Hollywood that you're thinking about. And one of the things that was most inspiring that I think you will be blown away by is just the statistics that she shares. You would not believe how much waste goes into a single Hollywood production. It will literally blow you away. And to me, it's just incredible that Emily's been able to build this rapidly growing company that's expanding all over the world, doing what she absolutely loves. And it's also helping the planet at the exact same time. I just think that's so inspiring. I know you're going to enjoy this interview and this conversation. So sit back, relax, and please help me welcome Emellie to the show. All right, Emellie, we are live. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and spending some time with all of us. I have been, and I'm super excited for this interview. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those listening, Emellie is, this is like you have the coolest business ever. So Emellie has built a very highly successful business called Earth Angel. And I'll let you better explain that, but I'm so serious when I say it's so cool what you're doing. I mean, just getting to spend time on big budget movie sets, meet really cool people, but most importantly, you do a lot of good. You make a huge impact on the environment and in the world. And I just was hoping today that we could talk a little bit about your story, your company, and really just the bigger problem in general. And I mean this, you're in this world of climate and environment and conservation. And a lot of us, we just don't know a lot, especially in the United States. I go to Canada. My oldest daughters actually live in Vancouver, and it's so different there than it is here. And I'd love to have you just share some of your wisdom on just how big the problem is, what needs to happen on just like a macro level. But first, I've got to hear a little bit about your story. What were some of your early influences that led to like what you do right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So early influences, I mean, I was always sort of a natural conservationist, I would say. I think that was drilled into me at a young age. Honestly, just from being in Girl Scouts. I was in Girl Scouts for like way longer than it was cool to be in Girl Scouts. And that, leave no trace mentality, that be a good steward was just really drilled into me at a young age. And then when I started I went to NYU, I studied film because I wanted to help create socially and environmentally conscious content. Like I thought I was going to be a documentary filmmaker. I really wanted to help leverage this really powerful medium of film and entertainment for good, to educate audiences about a lot of the social environmental issues that are, currently plaguing us around the world. And it was shortly after graduating from film school that I actually started working in the professional film world, and was just amazed at how inherently wasteful the process of producing content is, whether it's like physically, the sets that we construct and then we film in for, days and then have to tear down and throw into a landfill, or the sheer amount of fuel that's used to transport people, equipment, supplies, flying actors, and all types of folks all around the world. The sheer amount of food waste from just catering, from, having to feed hundreds of people, let alone extras, let alone stunt people, or, whatever the scene might call for. There's just tons of waste. And I was just like, I can't be part of this problem. I can't, perpetuate the problem. So I started to do a lot of research, on what was happening in this space. And it was right around the time, this was 2011, right around the time corporate studios started to hire sustainability officers. And this is also around the time the Producers Guild of America formed a green committee. And so together, the PGA Green and the corporate studios formed what we now know as the Green Production Guide. And so this is like best practices and a carbon calculator. So it was like, again, just preliminary stages of this. And what I was noticing, though, was like, despite having these resources, things just weren't happening on the ground in the day-to-day production, right? Like without someone there overseeing it, it was just falling by the wayside. So I convinced a producer to hire me to green his set in 2011. Took a chance on me, was like, yeah, let's see what you can do. Let's figure this out. And on that set, I got the nickname of Earth Angel. Like someone called me Earth Angel on that film set. And I got called a lot of not nice things too. I will say that, but this was like the nicer thing. And then somebody started calling me that on walkie. And once you're called something on walkie, that's it. That's your name forever. So I kept freelancing as a sustainability consultant on film sets. It grew very organically. People were like, hey, I heard what you did on this set. Can you come do it on my set? But it was really the catalyst for me to launch Earth Angel, the business, was right after I worked on The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because it got all this press and these accolades for being Sony's most eco-friendly blockbuster. And that was really when it dawned on me, like, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's like a scalable model we can create, because what we really need is not just one Earth Angel on one set. We need many Earth Angels on many sets, if we're going to really transform this industry.
And there's so many questions I want to ask you with that. So my first question is, how hard was it? I mean, you are a female entrepreneur. You're in an industry where there was I don't want to say there was no need, but people weren't budgeting for this service. Like, and you said it grew organically, but there had to have been some difficulties in between there from, somebody thinking, oh, this is really cool, we'd love to have you on set, to you can actually build a business and people can budget for this and pay for this. Like, what were some of the difficulties that you had to go through to get this off the ground?
Great question. Yeah. So basically what I did was I started a company to provide a service for which there was no market demand, which I do not recommend. It is definitely a more challenging approach. But, I did this and I took this risk because I knew one day there would be. Like, it's just a matter of time before every industry is facing environmental regulation, right? There is a finite amount of resources. And if you want to continue to be in business on this planet, you are going to have, a climate change resiliency plan, a thorough sustainability strategy. You have to track your carbon footprint and other environmental metrics. Like, this is just the direction the world and the economy is going, period. So for me, it was like, okay, how long is it going to take though? How long is it going to take for the industry to kind of catch up to this? And so the short answer is about 6 years is how long it took. And so I did a lot of solopreneuring in the beginning. The first, I would say 2 to 3 years, it was just me, and I was working production to production, but, under my company's name, basically, trying to make that transition of freelancer to entrepreneur. 2015 was when I hired my first employee, and, we started juggling multiple projects at a time. So that's when I felt like the entrepreneurship transition happen. But it was still a really big uphill battle. There still really wasn't a ton of market demand. We had, thankfully, some early adopters, some producers, production managers who really cared about this, who really believed in it, and who basically found money in their budgets to do this because it was important to them personally. But now what we're starting to see, and really this shift started to happen kind of like late 2019, early 2020, where productions are now starting to have line items for sustainability in their budgets because they know that you need to have someone managing this if you're going to do it, correctly.
Definitely. You should just work on all of Leonardo DiCaprio's films. he's
working on it.
Yeah.
Working on it. If you have his number, please let me know.
I think I have his brother's, cousins, neighbors, dogs. No, I'm kidding. He lives in New York, I think, doesn't he?
Some of the time. I think he's one of those bi-coastal ones, like many kind of A-list celebrities are, but
gotcha. Yeah. So I want to take a minute and spin a little bit on your company because, and I'm going to put this in the show notes, but I watched the most awesome video on Spider-Man 2, how it became the most eco-friendly, big budget blockbuster in Sony's history. And when I watched the video, like, I am not even kidding, Emellie. I was like, you do things that I would have never thought about. I mean, they're talking about from the smoke to the, everything, and how, talk us through a little bit about, you get booked for a big budget production. What are the things that your company and you do on that production, end to end?
Yeah, great question. So our model, we've tried to simplify it as best we can, because I think a lot of the job of sustainability professionals is to take complex ideas and to simplify them, right? So I think of myself as a translator a lot of times. I'm translating the language of sustainability into the language of production. So our model, when people ask us, how do you make a film set green? We say we provide the strategy, the staff, the stuff, and the stats to help production shoot sustainably. So it's all about the 4 S's. So strategy wise, that's really where we take these fundamental aspects of sustainability, like zero waste and energy efficiency and reporting and analysis and so on. And we figure out, okay, how are we going to tailor that to this particular production, right? So it's going to be different from a show that's shooting in New York City versus a show that's shooting in Atlanta versus a show that's shooting in Toronto. Like, we might have a different approach in terms of what vendors are available. We have to look at the supply chain procurement decision-making of every single department. So that's the other kind of tricky thing about our industry, is that we're basically an intersection of every industry, right? So we know about sustainable transportation, construction, food service, fashion. When it comes to costumes, there literally isn't an area we don't touch. But then we also do that on an incredibly tight timeline. Decisions are being made all the time. So we have to be able to reach department heads and decision makers, prior to, okay, we just sanctioned buying $1 million worth of lumber, right? Where's that coming from? And then how are we getting it? And is it sustainably forested, et cetera? So we have to, have a lot of those conversations to build that strategy. The staff piece is we recruit, train, staff, and supervise eco production assistants on all the shows we work with. So our eco PAs are really our boots on the ground folks who are physically setting up our recycling and composting bins on set, helping the crew, wean off of single-use plastics, being an educator, being a data tracker. They do a lot of different things throughout the show, but having that physical presence that's part of the shooting crew every single day really elevates the level of accountability. So we do all of the sort of education and training for that. The stuff piece of it is, as I mentioned, supply chain procurement. Are we getting the most sustainable products and resources we can? And then once the show is wrapped, where's all that stuff going? So we help creatively repurpose assets and materials, whether it's wardrobe, props, set decoration, the physical set, constructed set material. We're constantly trying to repurpose material, keep things out of landfills. So that's the stuff element. And then lastly is stats. You can't manage what you don't measure. So we do comprehensive carbon footprint assessments. larger impact reports, cost benefit analyses. So lots of different ways to measure our work so folks can see their progress.
That's so awesome. So I can imagine, and I have to ask you, like with some of these sets, do people fight you on some of this stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, to their defense, crew members, there's a lot of industry veterans who've been doing this work for decades.
Yep.
Crew members work really long hours. Like the industry, like minimum is 12-hour days. Often we're going into like 14, 16, sometimes even like 18 to 20.
Wow.
It's really intense. And we're also working in all types of conditions. If it's pouring rain, if it's a blizzard, if it's like whatever's happening, we're shooting most of the time, with the exception of like, we've had some natural disasters shut some of our productions down. But yeah, for the most part, people, they're up against a lot. They have to work with, like, schedules are constantly shifting, like maybe an actor's availability change. The scene we thought we were going to film 3 weeks from now, we're filming next week. Like, there's a lot of pressure on people who work in this industry. So for us, when we meet resistance, oftentimes it's coming from a place of these people are just burnt out and are up against a lot. So we try to meet people where they are, and then obviously the key here is being involved as early as possible.
Yep.
Because once that train has left the station and we're like a few weeks out from principal photography, you can just forget getting anyone's attention. Like, it's just not going to happen. So the sooner we can get involved so that we can have those dialogues when things are calmer and it's not such, chaos mode, the more likely we're going to see better results.
Yeah. And I want to read something for the audience listening from your website, because I had no idea. The statistics are pretty staggering. And I'm going to read this. One production leads to 432,000 pounds of waste, 74,000 water bottles used, 53,000 gallons of fuel, and 1,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And that is one production for one show or film in one country. I mean, there's thousands probably going on simultaneously. And in that, I want to segue that into the actual bigger problem. And you may not know this, but you're so involved in this world. Like, how big is the problem, like overall, like not just entertainment, but like, what are you seeing that's just fueling your passion to grow what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, and for a lot of people, like, the definition of sustainability is not just about environmental, it's about the social as well, of course. So to me, the environmental issues that we're encountering in our industry right now are not, they're not, sorry, edit this part out. I'm not being as I want to be.
I love the ums. Ums are good.
Yeah, okay. Like getting my actual train of thought here. The environmental issues in our industry are part of a larger industry issues. So we, of course, have problems with our diversity and inclusion. We have problems with health and safety. There are all these other considerations, to me, that are about how do we advance this industry to be one that is, extremely progressive and sustainable. Right. And so the environmental piece is just a piece of that, and so there's a lot of attention right now, for example, on the fact that the work hours and the lack of work-life balance in the industry is extremely unsustainable. Right. The amount of car accidents that have happened because crew members are driving home after working an 18-hour day. So to me, I do think this is a very big issue that is, fundamentally, we're producing this luxury good, right? Entertainment is not a necessity. It's a luxury. And we, as an industry, are often, really in the spotlight for being very progressive in our beliefs and things like that, but we are not as progressive in our practice, right? There's a disconnect that's happening here. And I think it also harkens back to a lot of, the industry's sort of exploitative tendencies, whether that's exploiting talent, or we're shooting in a remote location, we're exploiting those locations and disturbing ecosystems and biodiversity and things like that. So there's a real cultural issue at play here at the heart of this that, is going to take time to unpack and improve upon, but I think the more that we can speak to that and the more that we can create an industry that is net zero and not extracting more natural resources than it needs to, that has a healthy work culture, for its workers and its crew members, et cetera. And that obviously one that is advancing diversity and inclusion, that's just going to make us a stronger industry, right? Because there's no film on a dead planet. So like we need to figure out how to do these things if we want to continue to see this industry sustain.
I really like what you said there. There's no film on a dead planet. So theory and all of that aside, things that would be nice to have happen, like just in your honest opinion, like, do you think that we are headed in the right direction? And if so, is it too slow? Like based on the trajectory that you see right now, like what are your thoughts on the direction that we're just all going?
In the industry or as a
let's start with the industry.
Okay, great. As an industry, I think we are finally going in the right direction. I think there's a lot of momentum and traction in this space right now. But like I said, if you had asked me 10 years ago, where would we be in 2021? I would have said we'd be in 2021 where we were in 2016. Like I think we still have a ways to go. But I think that there is a lot of momentum. I'm really heartened by seeing some of these big commitments coming out. Netflix's commitment to be carbon neutral by 2022. There's a lot of really great progress and momentum happening here. But we do need to figure out, like, the biggest challenge for us is how are we going to move into renewable energy, clean sources of energy? Because as an industry that is constantly on the go, we use a lot of generators. We use a lot of diesel generators to power our sets and our equipment and things like that. We're not stationary. We're a traveling circus. So getting portable, clean energy solutions, there's been a lot of trials. There's a lot of different technology out there for it. I think is going to be the quintessential sustainability challenge for our industry.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's so true. That's refreshing to hear, obviously. So my next question is, I'm gonna have to edit this out. I lost my train of thought for a second. I was dead set on a question that, and then I completely blanked just now.
All good.
Yeah. So as far as your company, like, what's your vision over the next 10 years? Where do you see Earth Angel being in 10 years from today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think first and foremost, in terms of impact, I want to see us help our shows get to net zero carbon. Like we're seeing that reduction increase year after year. We're getting closer to that goal, but I would hope by 10 years from now, we have amazing circular economy solutions where we're sending zero waste to landfills. We're at net zero carbon, and there's clean energy solutions, and sustainability departments are standard, in the same way that parking departments are now standard and used to not be, like those types of integrations are happening really seamlessly within the industry. But I also want to see us as a company improve on our sustainability goals as well. I want to see, obviously, us grow and create more jobs, but also create good paying jobs with good benefits for everyone. And, for us to meet our own diversity and inclusion goals that we're trying to meet as well. And to be able to engage with the global market on this, right?
Right.
Because sustainability is not, it's not like emissions have no border, like emissions have no borders, right?
Yep,
So like
that's right.
everything we're doing has a ripple effect. And so right now the conversation around sustainable production has been very North America and kind of European centric, but there's a lot of globalization of the industry happening in the global South and so on. And so I think it's really important that we engage international thought leaders on this topic too. And, you know, that we're pushing for larger collaborative action, right? We need everyone working toward the same goals.
Yeah. And that reminded me of my question, actually. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read that you are now a part of the United Nations around like climate initiatives. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Awesome. So how does oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's a very early stages preliminary program, but the goal is that we're trying to create, in the same way the fashion and sports sectors have come together and united the entire sector around like a common climate accord. We're now attempting to do that for the film and television sector on a global scale as well. So it's a very preliminary, but that is ultimately our goal, what we're trying to achieve.
Awesome. So, and you may not know this, but like, how would you say the US measures up against a lot of these other countries out there when it comes to the effort that we're putting in moving the needle in the right direction?
So in terms of, you know, the number of emissions that countries are emitting overall, China has been the highest for the past few years, but the US is a close second.
Right.
However, that's just for the past few years. If you look at historical emissions since like, you know, industrialization, the US is by far and above, like way ahead as the highest. So, you know, the United States has a massive responsibility when it comes to like any climate commitments, you know, across the board. And then in terms of our industry in film and television in particular, you know, the US is a very strong leader because obviously Hollywood and the studio model is something that is, you know, that is the dominant model in the entertainment space. Other countries around the world have slightly different models. Like a lot of them have publicly funded, you know, film programs and arts programs and things like that. Whereas like we're heavily private. So we do have, to me, we have a certain responsibility because we are producing the most content, you know, and we're now doing that globally. And we're such a highly visible industry as well. So if we can really walk the walk of sustainability and integrate climate storytelling and other facets of sustainable messaging, not only into our physical production practices, but also into our content, just imagine the power that could unlock in, you know, needing to transform our society and our economy into a sustainable model.
Totally. And I just have two more quick questions. And my first one speaks onto what you were just talking about. I mean, you have this incredible education from Tisch. You wanted to become a documentary filmmaker. Do you ever think about still doing that? Like, I mean, do you still have the knowledge and the skill set to be able to tell an incredible story? And have you thought about actually like making that happen with all the things that you have going on already, obviously?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a storyteller at heart, and that's how I got, you know, involved in this business in the first place. So yeah, I would say that's not out of the question. I definitely wouldn't rule that out. But at the same time, it's really funny. I never saw myself being an entrepreneur and running a business. My mother was actually an entrepreneur. And I remember, you know, being a kid growing up and just like seeing how stressed she was all the time. I'm like, this is so stressful. Like, and she was the one who really encouraged me to go to business school. And I was like, no, Mom, I'm a creative. I'm going to. And then here I am running a business. Right. So, but at the same time, there's actually a ton of creativity to running a business too.
That's right.
So there's a lot of things that I've learned to enjoy about that at the same time, and like growing and scaling and hiring and bringing on new talent and new perspectives. And it's a really exciting organism in and of itself, in the same way that like a film or story or production is also its own kind of living organism too. So yeah, I would say whatever the future holds, I'm open to and excited about. And yeah, I would love to still, dip my toes in the actual like content and storytelling waters too someday.
That's super awesome. It just reminds me of, and it's been a long time, but I just remember, I can't remember if I read it or watched it, but when the movie Blood Diamond, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, came out, and there was this show, or it was maybe just an article that was talking about the impact that movie made when all of these activists couldn't break through. And the movie comes out, and all of a sudden every jewelry store in the world are having to train their employees on like how to respond to angry customers asking if they sell blood diamonds. And I just thought that was so powerful that, a film, a story can do something that logic can't accomplish after being silenced and ignored. And I just thought that was so cool. And that's, this is it's such a big problem that I'm just wondering, like, how cool would it be? I mean, you have Al Gore's, documentary that came out, but like just something that really opens people up to like, holy crap, like we've got to do something. And I look forward to that coming out. My final question is just, where can people follow you, your content, what you're doing, what you're putting out in the world? How can people support what you're doing? There's a lot of listeners that'll listen to this, and I'm just wondering, like, where would you like to point them? What can they do? How can they help? Please share all that. And I'll obviously put it in the show notes, but like, I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. Well, first of all, you can find us at earthangelsets.com is our website. And all of our social handles are at earthangelsets, plural, with a S at the end. So that's how you can find us. I definitely encourage folks, as you're watching content, viewing content, enjoying content, if you're following your favorite productions on social media or, whatever it is, like, don't be afraid to speak out and ask, like, was this a sustainable production? Are you meeting environmental standards? What did it take? I think the more audiences engage with that, then, the more people start to pay attention to that, whether that's studio executives or actors, or, there's a lot of different ways that people can advocate for more sustainable content, throughout a lot of the decision-making process. So that's something I definitely encourage folks to do.
Awesome. Yeah. It's, just, especially when you have kids, you start to like really think about, what world are we leaving them? What are they going to have to deal with? Like, I always see it as like, man, what if we were the generation that actually just took responsibility for our own and all of the previous generations before us, and just, the buck stops here. What can we do so that, our kids don't have to be just dealt with a huge mess that is past the point of actually cleaning it up and dealing with it. So that's why when I saw that, we could have this conversation, even if it's a small level of awareness, I just really appreciate it. And I thank you so much for your time and just what you've shared, what you're doing, what your company's doing. And I wish you all the success in scaling past. I mean, you're in what, 3 cities now?
Yes, we are.
Atlanta, LA, New York. So I wish you all the success in the world in doing and being something that you didn't actually want to do as an entrepreneur, but now that you are, hopefully the stress will lower over. Probably not though, but hopefully so. But I just want to thank you. And I hope that one day in a, sometime that you can come back on once you're in 20 locations and we can reflect on this episode and you could say, I knew it was going to happen. And it did. So thank you again for your time.
That would be awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Can I say one other thing? Really, just
please.
Because what you mentioned about Blood Diamond spurred this thought, and I wanted to just share it because you're absolutely right. Sometimes the science, no matter how clear and resounding, is not enough to change hearts and minds, right? We are innately driven by story and by narrative. And so this is the power, and this is why there's a burgeoning sort of impact movement within the film and television industry that's really geared towards this. What is the impact of the projects we're having, and how can we help stimulate that, for change and for good. And this is actually another big contributor, going back to my story and to why I got involved in this in the first place. One of my favorite films growing up was Erin Brockovich. And Erin Brockovich, great movie. Most people don't think of it as this way, but it's a climate narrative. It's about a corporation, wreaking environmental havoc, and, an everyday woman coming in and holding those people accountable to help the communities and the environments and the people who are at risk. So that movie, I think I contribute to seeing that movie as, a 12 or 13-year-old or however old I was, to me now being a climate activist, so that's the type of impact that our industry can have. And the more we're putting out those types of really powerful, engaging stories, I think, the more educated audiences are going to be, and the more we can change the hearts and minds that we need to accelerate the change that we need to see.
That's an awesome story. I look forward to seeing your film when you produce it and release it, hopefully soon. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks. Take care.